Good morning from Pike County, Illinois. It is a rainy, chilly fall day here in Pike County, and it's October 28th, 2025. I just realized the date about 5 minutes ago. I was sending an email and I had to put the date on something. I thought, it's October 28th. That day may not mean anything to most people, but it means a lot to me. It was on October 28th of 2018 that I accepted my first church as pastor. Now, I had been preaching before that. In fact, I was reminded this week I preached my first sermon in 2005 at the age of 10, almost 11. I was just a few weeks shy of 11 when I preached my first sermon. I don't know if it counts, but I did. And began preaching on a weekly basis at age 17. And preached around and traveled and helped churches, and a lot of good memories of. I had no idea what I was doing, but had a lot of fun doing it. And started traveling and preaching very young on the radio and in nursing homes and then pulpit supply and revival meetings and just all over the country. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. Went to Nebraska for a few years, met my wife, and 7 years ago today accepted my first church. What's interesting about that to me is the church I'm currently pastoring is Detroit Christian Church in Detroit, Illinois, which Detroit's only a village of about 100 people. There's two churches and a stop sign here and an ice cream place. That's about it. And we always joke we're on the south side of Detroit. But we're a country church, been here 150 years. But what's interesting about the fact that 7 years ago today I began pastoring my first church is 7.5 years ago this year, 2018, this church where I currently serve became without a pastor. And they have been without a pastor my entire pastoral ministry timeline. I have pastored two other churches in the time they had no pastor at all. And the elders of this church and the people of this church banded together and kept things going and did a great job, I should add. But I became a pastor for the first time 7 years ago today. I was there for just shy of 4 years. And I look back on those 4 years and some wonderful memories, unbelievable miracles God did. He did some amazing things. But I look at what I did, and I have very little to brag about. I learned everything not to do those first 4 years. My preaching style completely changed in those 4 years. I started off preaching just very shallow, topical sermons, and by the end of it, I'm preaching through books of the Bible. I learned how not to preach and became what I believe is biblical preaching, preaching through the text. I learned that there. I learned how to minister to people there by learning how not to. I tried to drive the sheep like cattle instead of lead them like a shepherd. I made a lot of mistakes. I hurt a lot of good people. And when we left there, it wasn't very pretty. And I look back on it, some of the issues that we left over, I would even say I'm not exactly where I was on some of that stuff now. But more important than the issues was the attitudes. I was a jerk. And some of God's people were jerks to me. I mean, I'm not going to accept total responsibility and I'm not going to deny it. It was pretty 50-50. I did a lot of things wrong. And I saw the ugly side of church people as well. And when we left Colorado, after being there for 4 years, we were deeply hurt. And we took a year off. And in that year off, we went to a church in Arizona. And those people were wonderful to us. They were unbelievable. And for that year, for the first half of the year, I'd go to church and just sit on the pew and cry. And I'd listen to the preaching, I'd listen to the singing, and I'd just sit there and cry and just regret everything and just think, I will never pastor again. Now, this story's going somewhere. Because after being there for a year, taking that year off, working multiple jobs, doing everything I can just to keep my family alive, we ended up going to Topeka, Kansas to start anew. Just to have the same old happen again. To take a really difficult situation. To take a mess. And I look back at this time and I regret very little of what I did in Kansas. This time, I wasn't a bull in a china shop. This time I wasn't a jerk. I was firm, but I tried to be very gracious. And we had to fight some battles there. The biggest, me, in a big city like Topeka, Kansas. Um, we struggled for those, I don't know, a little bit over a year we were there. Worked a job, lived in the church building. We set up bedrooms in the Sunday school classrooms to live in the church because we couldn't afford our own place. The church couldn't even pay its own bills. So I'm working a full-time job at Chick-fil-A. I'm pastoring a church, preaching anywhere from 5 to 12 people every Sunday. On a good day, we'd have 20. I mean, it was agonizing work. But God did amazing miracles for us in that year and a half or so we were there. God gave us a brand new vehicle. Somebody gave that to our family to use for the ministry. That was unbelievable. God provided needs. God was gracious to us in that year. And then it ended beautifully with us being able to merge those churches. There's another church nearby. We merged them. We were able to not just walk away on bad terms, but to leave them with a shepherd and come here. Now, I come to Illinois last December, almost a year ago right now. And I didn't know what church we'd end up at. I had 2 or 3 in my mind. I thought we might serve those churches. And Detroit was not on my radar at all. I've always pastored a Baptist church. This church doesn't have Baptist in the name. And so when they called me and asked me if I was interested, I said, well, I don't know. What do you all believe? And as I explained what I believe, they explained what they believe and found out we believe the same things. And hearing their story, and as I shared my stories, I laid all my cards on the table face up. We would meet, me and the elders, and I would explain where I'm coming from on a lot of issues. We'd meet for breakfast, and after we'd stay so long, we'd order lunch. We would just talk for hours and lay everything out on the open. And I look back now and see that 7 years ago today when I took my first church, and 7.5 years ago this year when this church became without a pastor, I could not have come here 7 years ago. I wasn't ready, and neither was this church. God had to sanctify this church and purge this church for 7.5 years. He had to sanctify and purge me for 7 years. And in that time, I have learned and unlearned so many things. And I have not figured it all out. I know I'm wrong on things now. I just don't know what they are. But I have seen God's hand working in this. And then when we came together in February of this year, and I look back from February to today, I have been humbled at how God has graciously put things together. And I realized this fully, I think, this past Sunday. The church did a pastor appreciation thing for us, and it was very humbling, very gracious of them. My wife gave them some pictures. They even put a slideshow together showing from when I was a little boy to all my ministry till I met my wife to how I came here. And I could see a quick slideshow of God's sanctifying work in my life. And I'm looking around at our people here. And several people made the comment, for 7 years we've been praying for God to send us the Johnstons. We've prayed for 7 years for this. And I don't want to sound arrogant. I'm not. I'm grateful. That's how they feel, because that's how I feel. Because I look and say, for 7 years, I was looking for them and didn't know it. I went to Colorado thinking I'd be there the rest of my life. I went to Topeka, Kansas thinking I'd be there the rest of my life. It took me 2 days to realize, I don't want to be here. But I stuck it out. Came here, and now I see this is where God was preparing us for all along. I hope to be here the rest of my life. The Lord is sovereign, and He may change that. But I can look back over 7 years and see God's divine providence working all things together for good in such a beautiful way. And I am so humbled by it. So I look back 7 years ago today. I've still been away from Colorado in lesser time than when I was there. I was there longer than I've been gone still. Next year it will tie at 4 years. And I look back at that, and a lot of you watching this video have known me throughout some point of the last 7 years. And if you go back earlier in those 7 years and I was a doofus to you, I apologize. I, by no means, am proud of everything I've ever done. But I am grateful for everything we've been through, because if I had never gone to Colorado, I would have never gone to Arizona, and I would have never gone to Kansas, and I would have never come back to Illinois to Detroit Christian Church. Everything that I've been through was to prepare us for where we are now. And I'm looking forward, not behind. Yes, I'm making changes, and I hope you are too. We should always be changing and growing. Yes, I hope I'm a lot gentler. I hope I'm a lot more charitable. But I also am stronger, I believe, on some stands. There are stands that I used to be wishy-washy on. Now I see the need to be hard. One of the things we talk about at our church is the statement, when the scripture is silent, we need to be silent. But I've added, where it's clear, we need to be clear. And you've heard the figures of speech. On the essentials, we must have unity. On the non-essentials, liberty. But at all things, charity. And that's true. But there is such a need to be authoritative. But I could not be effective today if I had not gone through everything we've gone through in the last 7 years. 13 years total I've been preaching. I don't know if I count 20 years ago when I was a little boy, but 13 years preaching on a mostly weekly basis. And I have not really been fruitful in that until the last 2 years. I have very little fruit from the previous. I've seen most of it in the last 2. So, the point of this video is, it's an important day to me. 7 years ago today, I became a pastor. And I don't ever want to stop being a pastor. I love being a pastor. But I could not be an effective pastor if I had not first been an ineffective one. I had to fail so I could succeed. Because I'm only succeeding now because I know my tendency to fail. So now when I'm faced with something, I have to go to Christ. And I still fail. I've made a few mistakes at Detroit. I look back and go, oh, that was me. And I know how to correct it now because I have failed so many times. So I'm glad where God brought us 7 years ago. 7 years from now, I hope to be even more closer to what Christ would have us be and even more effective.